Howard Mortman, when did you get the idea of writing a book about rabbis giving prayers to the Congress?
So that's a great question, Brian. The idea, it was slow in developing. Around 6 years ago, I began very much interested in the concept in general of prayers opening each session of Congress. Where I work at C-SPAN, therefore I watch a lot of C-SPAN, therefore I watch a lot of Congress. And the opening prayer in both the House and the Senate, for some reason, just really captured my imagination. It looks like nothing else that happens each day in Congress. It might be an empty chamber, but the messaging is so different and so global and universal, like nothing else you hear in Congress on a given day. So I've always been interested in the prayer as a congressional institution. Being Jewish, and I have to say at the very beginning, because that's where the story diverts. The few occasions when the rabbi was a guest chaplain in Congress, I kind of keened in on it even more, listened more closely, and I started kind of jotting down every time a rabbi gave a prayer in Congress. Kind of a weird little hobby, quirky, but I created a spreadsheet of every time I heard a rabbi give a prayer, and it happens about 7.5 times every year, about 7 to 8 times every year. Since World War II, rabbis give us a prayer. So I created a spreadsheet. And out of that, we're talking about a couple of years in a 6-year period, I just said it might be interesting just to figure out who they are and what they said, these rabbis. So I drafted up a manuscript based on that.
You know, the people that may not know you will not know what a tremendous sense of humor you have. So when I ask this question, it's with the thought of humor. Howard, how long have you been Jewish?
Well, I have to admit, ever since my circumcision, I'm very proud of my circumcision. I have hubris for it. So my whole life, born.
What does it mean? I'm not Jewish. So what does it mean to someone who lives a lot of being a Jewish person and obviously being terribly interested in the Jewish religion?
So it means it's an identity. I mean, obviously, America, in terms of Jewish history, America has been the greatest place to live for safety and security of Jews. And so just being proud of America for many reasons, just on the very narrow point of religion, this is part of just being a patriotic American and loving our country and everything it offers in democracy. I will tell you that as a result of doing this book, you become more aware of Jews allowed to practice their religion in a public setting, to be able to pray in the middle of Congress, in the literal heart of democracy, is really quite something. With no quotas, no one's saying you have to be an Orthodox Jew or a conservative Jew or a Reformed Jew, different gradations of religious observance. All Jews are welcome. And, you know, even in Israel, the Jewish homeland, there's no prayer that opens the Knesset. If you want to hear a rabbi open a legislative session, you have to come to America. You don't go to Israel for that. So this is very part and parcel of just be proud of our country.
Go back to the beginning. What did you do when you said, I think I got a book here? What was the first step you took?
So a lifelong dream has been to write a book of some sort. And you know, I can't write about myself. I'm bored of people who write about themselves. There's nothing for me to say about myself. I can't write about Lincoln or Kennedy. Those topics are taken. This is it occurred to me as I was kind of doing peripheral Googling, no one's ever written about prayer in Congress as an institution. People have maybe argued church state, the polemics going back and forth, and you know, should prayers be allowed? But it struck me, this is a tradition that goes back to the very creation, the first day of Congress. A chaplain has been involved, and a prayers open Congress. An open field. No one has done this kind of work before. Just an historical look at it, who these people are who pray. So as I was going along, just scribbling down in my Google Docs, my Google Sheets, creating this spreadsheet, kind of like your chasing a windmill kind of man in La Mancha thing, like who would do this? But it occurred to me, there's got to be something out of this that's worthy of telling a story. And so it kind of just developed. I started drafting it up, writing a manuscript over a period of years, and finally came up with something that I started marketing.
Well, let me start with this. How many people turned you down when you said this is a great book? And then who bought the book idea and why?
Yeah, so, and will not come as a shock to you, Brian Lamb, because you've interviewed many authors over your career, many books you've talked about. There is no market for a book on rabbis praying in Congress. I mean, it is a minuscule market. And I started pitching. So I wrote up I did everything wrong. People say, well, you have to write up a table of contents and then do a chapter. I wrote the whole thing first, just because because it would be impossible to try to pitch this if I didn't actually flesh it out and say, here's what I want to say, rather than say, I have an idea. So I wrote it up just to see if it would work. And it occurred to me, it worked just as a manuscript. But then you get to who would want this? And I started going after book agents, because that's what you mechanically have to do. The book, the practice is you get a book agent, but nobody was interested. And I can't blame them. There's no movie rights out of this book. There's no 7-Eleven souvenir cups of rabbis to sell. So there's really no purebred market for this. But it occurred to me as book agent after book agent rejected me, it just occurred to me, let's go right to the publisher, because if I'm going to get rejected, let's just get the people who can actually give me a book. So I went through a lot and found a publisher. And I will tell you right now, Academic Studies Press, which is my publisher, I am so thrilled with them, because they got it. This is the kind of concept where it's either you get it immediately or you don't understand what I'm talking about. They understood it. They specialize in Jewish books and I think Serbian books, or Scandinavian books, something. And I'm in the Jewish silo of their practice, and they liked it. The one thing that helped me, this is very important for telling the story, is because there's no guaranteed sales out of any of this. I engaged in a partnership with Washington Hebrew Congregation. Washington Hebrew Congregation is a Reformed congregation here in Washington, through two very generous donors. Their names are Mark Newman and Bruce Saul. Through a donation to Washington Hebrew Congregation. The technical term is called a subvention, I believe, where you go to a publisher and say, basically, I have money in hand. And Washington Hebrew Congregation became the partner for this. It makes sense. They've had the most number of rabbis who have prayed in Congress. And every senior rabbi since 1876 has been, from Washington Hebrew Congregation, has been a rabbi guest chaplain. So with that partnership in hand, kind of move things along a little bit to get this book to happen.
How much time do you think you spent on it? And not in a number of hours, but nights, mornings, weekends, that kind of thing.
Yeah, this has been all middle of the night, 2 a.m. weekends kind of work, both out of respect for my employer and also out of respect for my family. This has been, it's a lot of hours, middle of the night kind of research. The research was, believe it or not, the biggest part of this. Just finding, you can't Google rabbis praying in Congress. That's impossible. So you have to go through the C-SPAN video library, and you have to go through Congressional Record to find this. Once I found all the prayers, and once I was able to list out all the rabbis, then it got a little easier, because then I was able to categorize what they're talking about, and kind of, it fell into place in terms of what I wanted to say in this. But the bulk of this was just finding out who they are.
How about some quick takes? You say this in your introduction and through your book. How many rabbis have given an invocation in the history of the Congress?
So it's over 430 rabbis have given over roughly 630 prayers. The difference in the numbers, roughly 440 rabbis, 630 prayers, is because a number of the rabbis have given two or more prayers. About 100 rabbis have done multiple prayers. And that goes back from the beginning. Actually, the rabbi who has done the most number of prayers is very active still, Rabbi Arnold Resnikoff. retired chaplain in the U.S. Navy, has given, as of right now, I believe 16 prayers right now. We're taping this in early October 2020, but he has given 16 prayers, and that's the most of any rabbi. But the remainder, so roughly some rabbis have given 10 or 11, 8, 7, and so on. Most of them have given one, but that counts for the difference in the numbers there.
First rabbi to give an invocation.
So the first rabbi is really interesting. There have been scholarly articles about this rabbi. Rabbi Morris Raphael, R-A-P-H-A-L-L, gave us the first prayer in Congress. Was in 1860. And as you know, Brian, James Buchanan was president then. It was pre-Civil War. Rabbi Raphael from Sweden he came from Congregation B'nai Jeshurun, which is in New York City. And a little history of Rabbi Raphael. He was basically a celebrity. He was called a celebrity rabbi back then. He gave a lot of speeches. He was pro-slavery. And his story is he based his pro-slavery-ness in the Bible. It goes far afield from what I write, but it's kind of an interesting history. So that's the first one, was 1860 in the House. I will say this, and I know this from the research, the media had no idea what was going on. Some of the accounts, like in the New York Times then, called him a rabbi appearing in costume. He wore his tallis and his yarmulke, and people were laughing and they had no idea what was happening. So it's kind of a bit of a comical take on Morris Raphael back in 1860.
As a non-Jew, I'd be interested in how often you thought, as you're writing this, the people reading it may not be Jewish and they might need to have something defined.
Yeah. This book, although it says the word rabbis on the cover, as you can see right behind me, it's a history of Congress as well. This is a story that's not really been told of just prayer in general in Congress. I wrote this, obviously Jews would be most interested in it, but my hope is that, as they say about rye's bread, you don't have to be Jewish to love it. I hope people feel that they have to be Jewish to read this. This is for history, American history junkies. This is for Congress junkies, people who love the history of religion in general in America. What's for me, I pulled out the rabbis in the story. They are a very small part of the overall story of prayer in Congress. I pull them out because that's what I was focused on. But you can definitely take a lot of lessons out of this for non-Jews, for people interested in the chaplains, the Jesuits, Catholics, Protestants, just the history of chaplains as a whole. I do spend some part knowing that that rabbis are not the whole story of prayer in Congress. I do spend a little bit of time in the book. Other prayers I found along the way that have nothing at all to being Jewish, but I just was really interested in them. And I kind of kept on the side notes. Maybe one day, that might be with something else, just great prayers at great times. What was the prayer on the evening of D-Day? What was the prayer, great moments in American history in Congress? So that could be something else.
First woman rabbi.
Oh, so here's what gets really interesting. Her name is Rabbi Sally Prezand. Rabbi Prezand gave the prayer in 1973, the same day that the House voted to proceed with Nixon impeachment in the House Judiciary Committee. So it was a very historical time. If you know your history, in the 1970s, a lot of landmark and milestones for women achievements, first time ever for this, first time ever for that. And it was the first time ever a woman was ordained as a rabbi in America. It would happen to be Rabbi Sally Prezand the year before. The next year, in October 1973, she became the first woman rabbi to pray in Congress, sponsored by Congresswoman Bella Abzug, was her sponsor. And I really like this history. Where it gets kind of quirky is that her name is misspelled in the congressional record. Rabbi Prezand's name is misspelled. So, and she's the only rabbi I encountered in my research where the government got her name wrong. So it's actually, not only is it hard to find these old prayers, it's extraordinarily hard to find her prayer. for 1973. There have been a couple, about I think 14 more female prayers since then, but she was the first one in 73.
Who designed the cover that you can see behind you?
So the cover, thank you. The cover is designed by a wonderful person, Kate Connolly, a convert to Judaism, belongs to Washington Hebrew congregation as well. It is, I can't get the full screen here, but these are depictions of 16 rabbis who gave prayers in Congress, real life rabbis who gave prayers. These are taken from the C-SPAN video, and Kate Connolly created the graphic for this. It's an amazingly beautiful cover. It's like one of the few times I've come close to crying to this project was when she designed it and I saw the cover of it. It's exactly what I wanted. These are depictions, black and white depictions of rabbis. They are military. There's right above me, if I can point, is Rabbi Harold Robinson, a Navy chaplain who gave a prayer. Right down here is if I can point, is a Rabbi Amy Rader from Boca Raton, Florida, gave a prayer. So these are from screen grabs from the C-SPAN coverage of these prayers.
So how many Jews have you known that have the name Connolly?
So very few. She is the first. Yeah, Kate's the first one. Yeah.
So you say this in the book, a third of the rabbis who have spoken to Congress are from New York. And you say, as expected, why? Why is it expected?
Well, that's where the predominant number of Jews in America reside, is in New York City. And that's the first rabbi was from New York City, Rabbi Raphael, all the way to 2020 rabbis from New York. Members of Congress from New York sponsor the rabbis and that's part of the story as well, the members who sponsor the rabbis. But that's where the numbers fall out. It kind of, you would expect that New York would produce the highest percentage of rabbis. They also have the highest percentage of synagogues. So the numbers actually work out there for a change.
You have two daughters, one 17, one 13. How much interest have they shown in this project?
You're putting me on the spot because hopefully they'll be watching this. The 17-year-old and our younger one, 12-year-old, they are interested in this because I'm interested in this. And whether or not they read it, I hope they do. I'm not going to force them to. But it is, they have great things going on in their lives that we're very excited for. This is for me, this is an amazing personal achievement, but I don't want others to feel that they need to be part of this if they don't get it. Brian, is just like C-SPAN, it's like, if you don't, it's always there. C-SPAN, we don't force people to say you have to watch it, you have to appreciate, you have to love it. It's there. If you like it, if you get it, we'll have it for you.
Have you had a copy of your book in your own hands yet?
I have. I do, and it's 3 feet from here. I have a hardcover of it in my own hands. Yes.
And how expensive is that for someone that wants to buy it? The hard copy.
Yeah, well, here we go. And these are pricing established. We believe in transparency here. The paperback, $29. What a deal! The hardcover is priced at $129. I will say, you're welcome to purchase that. I think it's worth more like $109, but that's what my publisher puts it at. My publisher is Academic Studies Press, specializes in textbooks and academic books. So that is the pricing that they are used to.
Are you going to do a book tour?
Well, so 2 things about COVID and the book coming out at this time. One is I can do these things by Zoom. There are Jewish book festivals. I would love to be part of those. The Jewish market is a big book buying market. So when this is all over, when the COVID's all over, I would love that. Nothing scheduled. I do have speaking appearances scheduled via Zoom, 2 coming up later this fall. I would say that one thing, just on a mechanical point, the COVID thing is kind of interesting to have a book come out because all my numbers that are in the book basically are frozen from February 2020, which is the last time there was a rabbi guest chaplain in Congress. My fear was, now I always knew The moment this would be published, the numbers would change. There'd be more rabbis. It'd be a living document, basically. My fear was that during the publication process of submitting the manuscript and then the book coming out, there would be guest chaplain rabbis that would affect the numbers there. That hasn't happened because, as overall practice, there have been only 2 or 3 guest chaplains as a whole in the House of Representatives since March. So those numbers haven't really, that fortunately does not, has had no effect on my research at all.
I've always known you're a clean living person, but I was surprised to find out that under the Jewish religion, that there are 613 commandments that you must follow in order to get to heaven. In the Christian religion, there are 10. I just wondered, what in the world do you need 613 commandments for? This is in the book, by the way. Again, that's why it's interesting to people other than Jews to read this.
Yeah, so it's funny, when the 613 commandments that are in the Torah, commandments essentially given by God for the people of Israel to follow. The number 613 actually has been kind of a magical, even mystical number, the Jewish tradition. Jews recognize 613 as number of commandments. So when I counted up and there was a 613th prayer given in Congress, for me, that was kind of a moment of euphoria. I said, well, this is kind of cool. Now, that happened a couple of years ago, and now it's plowed through the numbers. So that's why I do make a bit of a to-do about it in the book. There have been, I'm glad you said Catholic tradition 10. In the ultra-religious Jews, they're called Lubavitchers, Chabad Lubavitchers, and they've given prayers in Congress. They always mention what are called the Noahide laws. The Noahide laws are 7 commandments given from God at the beginning of the Torah, and it's the 7 essential ones. And those have been cited by the Lubavitch rabbis who have prayed in Congress.
So in effect, you have 3 less than the Catholic religion now. So it's an easy ride for you from here on out, I guess.
Yeah.
Who has or when has any rabbi given a invocation in Hebrew?
Okay, are you ready for a great story? Can I share with you a great story? So the rabbis there have been rabbis who have spoken in Hebrew. Now I'm going to go backwards in the story. The rules say, so when you're a guest chaplain in Congress, the rules say you can't use a foreign language. Those are the current rules for that the chaplain's office gives to guest chaplains of any kind. So that rules out Hebrew, obviously.
Let me ask you, is that a rule of the chaplain's office or a rule of the Congress?
It's a rule of the chaplain's office. When they give guidelines for guest chaplains, no foreign language. There are, there are like 5 others. Like you can't mention a foreign country, I think is one of them or something. But the foreign language is one of them. Now, I believe that might be more of a more recent law rule, because I've found many examples going back of Hebrew being spoken by a rabbi giving a prayer. And I know that for 2 main ways: through the video itself, the C-SPAN video, and the second way is through the congressional record, which I have found examples of Hebrew being printed in the congressional record, which is kind of an odd thing to see. That happened a lot back in the 60s. So yeah, Hebrew has been spoken by rabbis. One of my favorite examples, the early 1990s, a Rabbi Maurice Lyons of St. Louis, Missouri, spoke in Hebrew in his prayer in the Senate. And at the end, he gave what's called the priestly blessing, which is the oldest of all the Jewish prayers going back to the Torah. And to hear him say that in Hebrew over the Senate, it's an amazing thing, because it's, again, the oldest of all the Jewish prayers. He said in Hebrew in the Senate, to bring the story to current days, Rabbi Maurice Lyons' family was observing his yahrzeit, which is the anniversary of his death, a couple weeks ago. And they were Googling for their grandfather and came across Rabbi Maurice Lyons in a YouTube that I had posted from his prayer, and they had never seen that before. This is thanks to the C-SPAN video. So that kind of brought it all full circle. Example of Hebrew being spoken.
I don't know why I want to ask you about this, but I always love numbers. You point out in your book that only about 2.2% of the American people are Jewish, but the percentage of rabbis that have given their speeches in the Congress is higher. But also, I remember, and I don't know what it is now, maybe you do, at one point, out of 100 senators, 15 of them were Jewish. I remember that a couple of years ago. It may have changed. And do you know the percentage of people in the House that are Jewish? And I would just throw it open to you. Why is all this when it comes to these numbers?
I don't know offhand the number of House members. I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to guess it's like 20 or 30 current House members are Jewish. It matters for the percentages because in a way, rabbis are overrepresented in the number of prayers they give in Congress versus the overall Jewish population in America. That's important. Going back to what we were talking at the beginning, was just the opening, the welcomeness that America provides. Centuries worth of rabbis being welcomed to give prayers in the center of democracy.
So, give us your own background. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to both high school and college? And where did you get your Jewish training?
Oh, completely a native of Washington, D.C. Grew up in Maryland, inside the Beltway, Prince George's County in the early 70s, public school, Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, University of Maryland in the mid to late 80s, those crazy mid to late 80s at Maryland. And all my jobs in D.C. have been in the political media world. Before C-SPAN, I worked at MSNBC for Chris Matthews, National Journal, The Hotline, which is a daily political publication. So it's been all in this DC political media world. My Jewish identity comes from my parents, my father. I come from the Reform Jewish tradition, which is, I'm going to get in lots of trouble for this, but the easiest way to call it is the least observant. And I know I'm going to get hate mail for that. But if there's Reform, Conservative, Orthodox Jews follow all or many more of the commandments of the 613 than Reform Jews do. But that being said, my Jewish identity is no less solid than the most observant of religious Jews.
You take on in the book a very controversial subject, and that is the number of people in the United States and even in the Jewish religion that don't believe in God. You point out that, I don't know, I think I remember you said a third of Jews do not believe in God. I don't even know that you want to answer this, but where does this put you in this spectrum? Are you actively practicing your faith? And what do you think of this number?
So I'm happy to answer that. I'm a practicing Jew. I believe in God. I'm proud of my Jewish history, where we are in the continuum of the Jewish experience. And I want my family, I hope that they grew up with Jewish values, just like I did. For those Jews who don't believe in God, that's their business. That's not my business. I'm having a tough time raising my own family. I have to worry about, the third of the Jews who don't. I put that on the book because there have been a number of prayers that don't invoke God at all, or don't even indirectly mention him. That's important because prayers, taking rabbis out of this, prayers in general in Congress, are not directed toward the members. They're directed toward God. And so when you hear a prayer of any religious denomination in Congress, the House or Senate, you hear them nearly always invoking God at the very beginning and not talking to the members. So God is an important part, practically, procedurally, for these prayers in Congress.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the chaplain in the House is a Catholic priest, and the chaplain in the Senate is a Baptist, former admiral in the Navy, African American. Has there ever been a Jewish person as the chaplain?
So no, I will tell you, as a result of my research, I know personally of rabbis who would love to be chaplain, and I'm sure there's always inside the Beltway angling to be the next official chaplain. A couple rabbis who I've written about in the book, I'm sure would love to have that honor. I will. So no, there's never been a. I think the number of Catholic chaplains is very small, but there's never been a Jewish one. I will tell you that the House Chaplain's Office under Father Conroy, very helpful in writing this book and been very supportive of it. And they get it. They understand the value of this work. But no, there have been no official chaplains of Congress who have been Jewish. And the official chaplains, by the way, are paid for by taxpayers. They have staff. Their staff are taxpayer-paid House and Senate staff as well. So that's part of the official structure of Congress to have these offices.
In anticipating your second book, if you were to walk around the Capitol and maybe even the city of Washington, Supreme Court, White House area, would you find a lot of religious symbols? In other words, I'm thinking statues and things like that. I mean, you mentioned Maimonides and Moses and the House chamber and around there. Would there be a lot of others around the Capitol?
So on that point, the Maimonides and Moses examples are really important because they are inside the chamber. When you're when you're at the rostrum and you're looking out, you're looking straight at Moses, which has been an image that, and he's one of the, I think it's 12 portrayals around the inside of the chamber. And that's been referred to when Netanyahu spoke in Congress. He said, I'm looking up, I'm looking at Moses right now. There is other, I'll tell you, I don't know offhand, there is other religious imagery. The Museum of the Bible in DC has done, and that's part of what their messaging is, their exhibits, is look at all the imagery, obviously God, and God we trust. So I mean, that is part of, it's on the money. So that's, I mean, just the concept of God alone is part of the tapestry of America.
A couple more questions to you. Give us a couple of examples of when you were doing your 6 years of research where you said to yourself, wow, I had no idea.
I had that a lot of times. I'll give you one of the weirdest examples. This will get me a little bit of trouble, so I'll couch this a little bit. There is a group called Jews for Jesus. And Jews for Jesus are former Jews who that now say they believe in Jesus. It's a cult, Jews for Jesus. One of their rabbis has given a prayer in Congress as a rabbi, sponsored by Senator Locke Faircloth about 20 years ago. So when I first saw the Jew for Jesus rabbi, they call them Messianic Jews, gave a prayer. That was just kind of, wow, I had no idea that happened. I've had other really big eureka moments along the way. I've more recent examples of, I've had people who gave prayers who have just discovered this book through the social media platforms, or their widows have discovered this book and have reached out and shared examples of or personal anecdotes from this. I'll tell you, one of the saddest, I've also had sad moments researching the book, is discovering how many of these synagogues no longer exist, particularly in middle and small towns in America, in Pennsylvania, some of the, or Appalachia or in Georgia, and a lot of synagogues in New York no longer exist. It's kind of, in a way, heartbreaking to kind of imagine what, they produce rabbis then, but the synagogues themselves, just because there are no Jews left in these cities, are gone. So that was just kind of an interesting part of the Jewish history behind it.
So I suspect if I buy this book, the $129 version of it, the hardback, that I'm going to see this is a leading question, as you can tell, one prayer after another, 400 pages of just one prayer after another. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the easy way out. The easy way out was just to say, well, let's just cut up the congressional record, slap them together and get some glue stick and just put it together and call it a book. Celebrity TV people who do here's every column I've ever written, and let me just package that up. No, sir, we do not do that for you at all. As the book buying public, we actually give thought, research, and create a story out of this. Two main buckets for the story: who they are and what they said. So I've created a narrative out of this. Sure, one day on my deathbed, maybe I'll go back and just slap them all together and just say, more rabbis praying in Congress, and do it that way. But no, this is a real, and it's my first ever attempt at this, an academic kind of study for this. So no, it is truly a story of rabbis praying in Congress.
One of my big surprises in the book was the quote from former President Richard M. Nixon. Quote, "The invocation is often the best speech of the day," unquote.
Yeah, I believe he was vice president at the time, the head of the Senate. He said that. Other historic figures, Robert Byrd wrote a couple paragraphs once for History of the Senate, talking about how great the prayers are. My two quick fun Richard Nixon parts of the story are Rabbi Korf, famously Nixon's rabbi, gave a prayer in Congress before he was Nixon's rabbi, when he was still a Democrat, I think sponsored by Margaret Heckler, Congresswoman, because he was from Taunton, Massachusetts, his synagogue. I think it was 1970. Rabbi Korf gave the prayer, and again, they're known as the rabbi, Nixon's rabbi. The second, one of my favorite anecdotes, going back to what you asked earlier, was a Rabbi Norman Gerstenfeld, who was the chief rabbi of Washington Hebrew congregation, was slated to give the opening prayer in the Senate, I think 1956. Traffic delayed him. He did not arrive to the Senate in time. So the prayer was given by then presiding over the Senate, Richard Nixon, sat in for Rabbi Gerstenfeld at that session. And the news accounts say that the rabbi was held up in traffic. So, Brian, we can only imagine how quaint and adorable the Senate traffic must have been back in 1956.
You also quote the editor of the New York Times, Dean Baquet, as saying, "We don't get religion," unquote. What's that all about?
He said that right after the 2016 election, when the media did a lot of how did we get this wrong when Trump beat Clinton. And he was, that's one of the things he said, we just don't get religion, meaning that they didn't understand the forces that are typically not accounted for in what, the New York, DC axis reads. So I believe, if I have my history, I think the New York Times then assigned a religion reporter to get it right. Many publications now, the big ones, have religion reporters. The Washington Post has several. AP has religion reporters. New York Times. It's not. It's a small beat. There's not that. Like everything else in the media, it's shrinking. The New York Times does a good job now of connecting politics with religion. It's a fascinating story just to see how religion plays in the political and public affairs life of America. But they do, and the Washington Post does a good job of this as well, of just connecting all the dots better than they did, a while ago.
I know you've strung together a lot of video from the C-SPAN archive with some of the rabbis giving their talks in the chambers. How many videos are there total since the archive was established?
So the C-SPAN video archives gave me a couple great, I couldn't have done this book without it for a couple reasons. To answer your question, I think it's roughly about 200 rabbis appear on video. The first one is 1985 in the House of Representatives, and it's Rabbi Joshua Haberman, Washington Hebrew congregation, has the oldest prayer that lives on video. He was sponsored by Congressman Ben Gilman, sponsored him, and Ben Gilman's sponsoring remarks thanked Rabbi Haberman for presiding over his marriage, his wedding, and who was the speaker who said, "I now present guest chaplain Rabbi Joshua Haberman." That's right, it's Tip O'Neill. And so it's the only example I have, thanks to the video, of Tip O'Neill introducing a rabbi. So roughly about 200 of these prayers live on video. The video, I could not have done this without being able to see it. For seeing what they wear, who wear yarmulkes, who wear a tallis. Only one rabbi I have wears a tallis, and which is the prayer shawl. And that's Rabbi Mark Getman, again from New York, wore a tallis. The only thing I've seen on video. Now, there may have been more going back before the video days. A fun part of this has been members of Congress sponsoring rabbis who get the Hebrew wrong, who flub and blooper reel the Hebrew pronunciations. And we Jews don't make it easy on the Gentiles sometimes, and words like Lubavitch and Chabad and all that, but it's kind of fun to see them mispronounce both parties. We're bipartisan here. Both parties mispronounce the Hebrew when they sponsor. So the video has been enormously important for this project.
This possibly be the last question, and I may get myself in trouble on this one, but I was amused when I saw you thank Mark Newman for his support, and I'm looking at the paper that I wrote it down on, and that he had the honor of signing your marriage license. And I just wondered if you did that on purpose, that he was honored to sign your marriage license?
Oh, Brian Lamb, what a great question. I'm glad this is the final question. Mark Newman has been a longtime friend, and I will tell you this, his father, Rabbi Isaac Newman, gave the prayer in Congress twice, and he died a couple years ago. Rabbi Isaac Newman, Holocaust survivor, and he was twice. Dan Crane sponsored him once, and I'm blanking on the other one from when he was with Iowa. So Mark Newman's dad did it prayer twice in Congress. His father, Isaac Newman, also has a rare distinction of being the only rabbi guest chaplain in Congress who was also a convention chaplain, meaning that Isaac Newman gave a prayer at a Republican convention in 1992, opening one of the sessions of that convention. So the only example in the modern era of a rabbi being both a convention rabbi and a Congress rabbi. And add to that the distinction of him signing my marriage contract, the ketubah. That's correct.
Again, Howard Mortman, if people want this book, shameless plug for you, in your own video, what's the easiest way to get it?
Well, Brian, you always ask the tough questions. Enough with these.
Top one, yeah.
I will put in this YouTube below a link to it through Academic Studies Press. If you use the discount Mortman signed, not only do I sign a copy for you, use the promo code, but you get 20% off the cover price. I should be honest though, I let people know that if you pay full price, you get all the pages, but I'll leave that up to you.
I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to interview you for your new book. And I wish you a pleasant experience from here on out.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity to appear with you on Zoom and YouTube.